In 2014, I started asking a question. Where are the Black Brazilian coffee producers? I asked the global coffee community. I knew the history of coffee was through enslavement of West Africans who brought the industry in Brazil to be the largest exporter, largest producing country from the start, right? So we've imported coffee from these producers. We've seen advancements with purchasing more land, purchasing more equipment, gaining certification, winning coffee competitions, being highly sought after, even in the local community for their coffee. They're like celebrities in their country.
Welcome to Civically Grown, where change makers share the roots of their leadership and the impact they're cultivating today. I'm your host, Dr. Shaniece Criss. Everyone, I want to introduce you to Phyllis Johnson, president and co-founder of BD Imports and founder of the Coffee Coalition for Racial Equity. Growing up the youngest of 8 in rural Arkansas, she learned persistence and collaboration early. For over 25 years, she's connected coffee producers in Africa and Latin America to roasters in the US and Canada, while championing gender and racial equity in the industry. She's helped create opportunities for women and Black entrepreneurs, spoken at the UN, and received awards, including Harvard Kennedy School's Barbara Jordan Award. Phyllis lives in Georgia with her husband, and they have 3 adult children. And she's brewing change one cup at a time. You can read her full bio on our podcast site. Phyllis, I'm so happy to see you.
Oh, it's
Oh,
great to be here.
thanks. So I asked all my guests this question. What is a song lyric or quote that you really think captures your leadership growth over the years?
Yes, thank you. That's a beautiful question. And I just want to say how much I really appreciate the way that you organized the discussion for the day and allowing someone like me who's coming to the close of my career at some point in the near future to really, really look back at younger years. So thank you for that. Um, there's a quote that I really enjoy, and it came to me not too long ago. I would say in the last 5 to 6 years. It's by George Washington Carver, and it says, "Anything that you love enough will open itself up to you."
That's
And
beautiful. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. It that spoke to me. I was delivering a presentation at the World Coffee Producers Forum in Brazil, and I was trying to put together my speech. And when I read that, it kind of summed up where I started as a young person, as someone trying to find my way and what I wanted to do in life, and committing myself to something and finding out that you can really learn so much about things and learn the secrets of things that you may have initially thought were very, very challenging or difficult.
That's very encouraging too, because a lot of people sometimes they feel resistant to start because it just feels so overwhelming.
Yes.
But that quote also shows that it's for you. So just go
Uh-huh.
forth. That's good.
Right.
So what I want to ask first is, can you give us a little summary of the things that you did in youth leadership?
Yeah. Well, I was busy. I've always been busy. I come from a large family, 5 sisters, 2 brothers, and I saw my siblings very, very busy. And so I was encouraged by them. I was inspired by them. I was inspired by my mother. Some of the things that I can remember that I did was in high school, I was a part of the Vocational Industrial Clubs of America. And we had a debate team, and we would compete on a national level, um, being able to go through parliamentary procedure. And I was the secretary, and I would just work really hard at getting good at being the secretary. And I would create my own way of writing and language and, things that I knew what was being done or said during the meeting. And as soon as the gavel would go down for close of the meeting, I would stand. And that I learned was the most impressive thing. Like, what secretary is ready to deliver the moment the president closes his or her mouth? We came together as a team, as how we felt when we were winning together. That had a lasting impression on me. But I do think winning and putting together a team with the large family, it first started with my family and moved out from there.
It seems like you probably had a lot of lessons from your family, a lot of things, like you said, with collaboration when I was reading your
Yes.
bio and conflict resolution. I can imagine there's a lot of things that you had to sort out with being part of
Yeah,
a large family.
correct.
So, what's a vivid memory from your youth leadership days that still sticks with you?
I remember when I was 16 or 17 and I got a job working at a fast food place. And I noticed how the people who worked for the fast food restaurant, we were separated based on race as far as where we worked. If there was a black person hired, that person worked in the kitchen. If there was a white person hired, that person worked on the front counter. So when I was hired, I went to the kitchen. So I'm working in the kitchen and I'm just like, I'm always observing. I'm a scientist by nature. And I kept noticing, and it continued to happen. There's a lot of turnover in fast food, so it didn't take long for that to play out, right?
Right.
So I went to the owners of the restaurant and I said, I noticed something. And I shared with them what I noticed. They were offended. No one had ever said that to them. They responded with, well, would you like to work the front counter? Well, as a matter of fact, I do. So I did. And then I noticed that my friend got to work up to the front counter. And then before long, they were bragging on me to the customers. This is Phyllis, and she blah, 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 blah. And I was like, isn't that funny? I would otherwise be in the kitchen and I wouldn't have to have visibility to their customers. So, yeah, even those types of moments, they still stick with me.
That's a very powerful moment. Um, do you remember what time period that was in?
Oh, wow. Let's see. That was in the early 80s, because I went off to college right after that. So that was early 80s, probably before you were born, Shanice.
I was born in the 80s.
Okay. Okay.
So it's really good to hear like that powerful experience, but just speaking up. You observed. Some people observe and they don't say anything, but you did. You brought it to their attention. And I think that takes courage. Did you feel like you had to have courage at that time, or that's just something that you just felt you had to address?
It felt like I just had to address it. It was just burning in me. I could not hold it. Now, later in my life, I've had to have courage to do things. I think at that age, I wasn't smart enough to know what the pros and cons were. What if you lost the job? What if they started to treat you poorly? I didn't think about that. And sometimes when you're younger, you don't think about what's at stake. And that's also an advantage.
I think that can be an advantage at times. So when you think about your early leadership experiences, how do you think that impacts the way that you lead today?
I think my early experiences allowed me to understand the value in getting people to work together and for us to see value in each other. And it also allowed me to realize that once you bring everybody along, we all benefit from that.
So let's look at what you do now. I find it
Uh-huh.
so fascinating. This is such a different world to me. Can you
Mhm.
just please tell me what is your focus at work now? Especially because our audience may not be familiar with how that that process works.
There's some teaching about what you see is just the iceberg, and then there's a whole big sea of mass underneath the water. The coffee industry is like that. And what we see in the United States is coffee consumption. We see coffee being brewed. We don't necessarily see it as a plant. We don't
Right.
see it growing in a field, right? Because I grew up on a farm, we were working in cotton and soybean and stuff like that. When I discovered that coffee started out as a plant, I knew that there was something in it for me because I could relate to that. I could relate to a commodity being grown and who harvested it and how it traveled, and not fully understanding how it traveled, but learning that. So I entered after studying microbiology and working in the science area for a while. I decided to become a coffee importer. And I, at the time, just didn't know a whole lot about coffee. But here's one thing I said, Shanice, if I can pass organic chemistry, I should be able to taste coffee and find my way in this. And so I did. It required all sorts of acts of bravery for me, for someone growing up on a rural farm in Arkansas. It required international travel to countries I'd never been before. But all of this was step by step. First I went to Costa Rica, but I wanted to import coffees from Africa, East Africa. So I went to Costa Rica first, and I learned many lessons there. And then I went to Africa the next year. And so gradually started to make my way throughout pretty much the entire world.
Wow. So in Africa, what are some of the countries that you focus on?
East Africa is where they grow the higher quality specialty coffee. Kenya, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Tanzania, Burundi, Congo. Those are, if you look at those little countries that are just kind of right there, some are landlocked. So you get to learn all sorts of things about international development, which is why I showed up at the Kennedy School, is because when you start to work in a commodity that comes into the country, you find yourself in the middle of development work because you're like, wait, I took an economics class. Why are so many countries poor, volatile, and unstable? And you want a lot of answers to things you don't have answers to.
How long have you been working in this industry?
26 years.
26 years. That is amazing. So I want to drill down into some leadership things. So
Yeah.
can you talk about a leadership challenge that you had and how you
Mm.
overcame it?
My husband Patrick and I worked together in starting the business and running the business for the first few years before he went back to work in his field of study, engineering. But it was just a mountain of challenges for first of all, for an entrepreneur, for someone learning about something that they really didn't know about. So there was this challenge of self-doubt within
Hmm.
myself, really, that I needed to overcome. There was always a challenge. And even to this day, I've overcome a lot of the challenges. But one thing I will say, when I look back at my work span, I've spent 30 years serving on boards. And so I've always worked, had a job, had a business, and did other things on the side. So the other things on the side allowed me an opportunity to learn faster, almost, to learn more, to develop the relationships that I needed to see more. I was oftentimes asked to join boards. From the time I was 25 years old, I was asked to join a board. And I had no clue what I was doing. It was a school for adolescent kids who, had some real challenges. And then from there, my kids' science museum to coffee organization. So I've been on 8 to 10 boards, spending about 32 plus years on boards.
Wow.
And I think that people have always thought of me as a leader, but the funny thing is, I don't feel like a leader.
You don't feel like a leader. So what do you feel like?
I just feel like myself. I
Oh,
I feel like I'm always finding my way, and when I started this nonprofit, the Coffee Coalition for Racial Equity in 2020, talk about a leadership challenge.
what you were saying earlier about when you're starting in a new industry, what's some advice that you'd give to someone who is starting in a new industry and trying to become a leader in that area?
I hear people say all the time, pick and choose what you should do. Just be very selective. And while I think that is good advice, in all honesty, I don't follow that advice. If I have the capacity to do it, I do it. Running a business, running a nonprofit, if I'm inspired in the morning to write an article for Global magazine, I'll start writing because it feeds me. Sometimes I think we sit around and wait for the right opportunity, but the right opportunity shows up when you're just busy. And I'll give you an example of that. You and I probably never would have had the opportunity to know each other if I had not been volunteering my time to work with women leaders in East Africa. And there were no more funds available to pay me as a consultant. And I said, but this is important work. And I did the work. And as I was doing the work, there was a student from Oxford in the audience, and she was taking notes as I was speaking with the women from Africa about the work we were doing. And she said, I'd like to write a case study and I'd like for you to be the antagonist. Now, had I said, well, you can't pay me, so look, this is not what I'm going to be doing. And I understand the need to earn a living. We all need that and require that. I look for spaces to give my time
Hmm.
because in giving is when I've received the most.
I like this. You're doing things that you like. You say yes, I'm assuming, to projects that seem interesting to you.
Hmm.
I've found that a lot of times saying yes, it also gives me clarity about what I want
Yep,
to do and what I don't want to do, especially when I think of board service. And now, if someone asks me to be on the board, I have specific questions I ask to make sure it aligns with what I like to do at this moment in time. And so you just
exactly.
keep gaining more and more knowledge.
Exactly.
What's a time where you felt that your leadership really made a difference?
Wow. In 2014, I started um, asking a question in the coffee industry. And that question was, where are the Black Brazilian coffee producers? It was very uncomfortable for people. But I asked everyone. I asked the big companies. I asked the East Africans that I worked. I asked the global coffee community. I asked the Brazilians. I knew the history of coffee was through enslavement of West Africans who brought the industry in Brazil to be the largest exporter, largest producing country from the start, right? Up until this day, Brazil remains the top coffee producing country. I never met a Black Brazilian. So I started asking this question. And I asked a question to this woman because she was working with empowering women in her country in Brazil, and I was working with women in East Africa. And that's how we met. And so I was just tired and I was at a conference and she was sitting there with her iPad and I was looking at the disparity and some of the women from the other countries didn't have the technology to show. And I was like, hey, where are the Black Brazilian producers? She knew what I was asking. And we started a project. What I didn't know is she herself had done some work around empowering Black Brazilians in her own community. And so I went to visit her, and for the first time, she and I went to visit a local neighbor who happened to be a Black family.
Hmm.
And I started to gather their stories and understand who they were. I could finish their sentences when it came to dealing with racism. Every time I would take my coffee to the co-op, they would act as if it wasn't quality and give me the lowest price. We're first generation coffee owning family. Our lineage we've sharecropped for many, many years. So the stories were there. My experience in being an African American, my family working in cotton mirrored their story. So we developed that program for the last 5 years. We've imported coffee from these producers. We've seen advancements with purchasing more land, purchasing more equipment, gaining certification, winning coffee competitions, being highly sought after, even in the local community for their coffee. So now I've created competition. They're like celebrities in their country. And Brazil is very happy of that, but they're kind of like, why didn't we see this? So sometimes it takes people from the outside to see things that are right in front of their face.
It sounds like you did interviews and you collected the same story and you saw what people needed. And that's helpful because sometimes people in leadership don't take time to listen to people's stories, but it sounds like you were able to gain so much knowledge in that aspect and then realizing what type of programs you wanted to put in place. So that
Yeah.
sounds really exciting. Have you done that in other countries too?
Just Brazil right now. We're hoping for other places. There's a global tariff thing happening, making it very difficult
That's
for the coffee
understandable.
industry. Right.
Well, I think what you're doing already is amazing because you're helping a whole country and the landmass is much bigger than the US. And so that
Yeah.
is making such a difference. So I want to ask other people who are in this stage of their career,
Mhm,
your stage, what
mhm.
advice would you give them?
Oh, wow. Have fun. Have fun. You know, I I think it was a pandemic, but I looked up and I thought, if not now, when? You know,
Yes.
my kids are grown up. Our son has a PhD in bioinformatics working in the Bay Area. Our daughter is a marketing professional in Los Angeles. And I'm like, if not now, when? And it has to be by choice. And it is by choice. I approach every challenge. I tell the exporter that I work with in Brazil, we pull up to our Zoom calls and we say, what challenges do we get to help solve with this year's crop?
What are some of the challenges that people have with their crops?
Well, it could be logistics. It could be climate change. As climate change happens, then there's smaller bean size, lower density, not just smaller bean size, but a smaller yield. The crop that used to produce 100 bags might now produce only 70 bags. But those farmers still need income, and so I'm very fortunate that we have buyers, coffee roasters in the US and in Canada and Europe who are open to understand the needs of the producers, that they understand that they need enough money to continue farming. So that's a challenge. When we think we're going to get more coffee, we get less. We get 30% less. When there's a delay at the port, there's a backup. When their shipments don't go out, it's a logistical thing. When the bank wants to hold its funds, when there's tariffs, when the market is very high inside the country because there's an internal coffee market for all the countries that trade coffee. So does it make sense for them to sell within their own country or export? There's a whole, and it changes. If you like problem solving, it's something you should consider.
It sounds very complex, but with your attitude of what can we solve today, it seems like just the mindset to have to help people move forward. And it sounds like you really enjoy it.
I do. I grew up on a farm, right? I know how people feel. I know how we're connected to land through our ancestors, right? How rooted in that space we are. So yeah, it's a part of me.
Wow. So, Phyllis, I asked this question to all my guests. So, if your leadership style was a type of tree or a plant or a flower, what would it be and why?
I think my leadership style is similar to the monstera that I have in the background. You may or may not be able to see it, but it touches the ceiling.
Could you say the
And
name of that? Is that a plant or a flower?
it's a plant. It's called a monstera. I don't know if you can
Oh,
see it.
that's beautiful. So it kind of hangs down. It's very green. It seems like it's quite big as well.
Its its leaves can be up to 3 feet across. It is
Wow.
a huge plant. The plant came to me very small, and I nurtured it. I took it from water. My son brought it during COVID, and I found it one morning outside on our deck in a flower vase inside with water. He studied plants, so he kinda knew what it was. And it was just one stalk. And I took it and I put it in dirt after a while, and then I put it into a pot, and then I put it into a bigger pot. And then it became like as we repotted it and repotted it, it went from something that was this big to something that touches the ceiling with 3 feet wide leaves.
Wow.
And over a period of 5 years. So I feel that my leadership style is like that. It starts really small, but it opens up to big life-changing things. So yeah, I would say the monstera.
That's nice. Some of our listeners might decide to go and buy one because they're so inspired about your leadership journey and growth. I just thank you so much. I I didn't know a lot of these things. We saw each other in passing in graduate school, and I just feel so blessed to get to learn about this from you today. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to say that I have so much respect for you. I see you doing wonderful things out there. The most beautiful thing is that I see you taking your daughter with you to experience the world and the things you experience. So I really can appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Civically Grown. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, stay grounded and keep growing.